Today, the very name conjures images of hallowed halls and revolutionary beginnings, the cradle of liberty, the birthplace of America, a state of steady traditions, of brick and ivy intellect. But rewind to the dawn of the 1800s, and Massachusetts was not a museum of its own past. It was a churning, fractious engine driving the uncertain future of a young nation. Through this journey, we will witness Massachusetts's 19th century, a saga not of peaceful reflection, but of relentless, often painful reinvention. It is a story written in thread and steam, in conscience and cotton, in immigrant dreams and nativist fears. A story where the ideals born in its own soil were tested in its own streets, and where a society, confident of its moral compass, was repeatedly torn apart by it. Our story begins not at a battle monument, but at a wharf. The year is 1801. The stench of salt cod and the tang of fresh sawn oak fill the air of Boston Harbor. Massachusetts, its rocky soil long since yielding primacy to the sea, is a maritime empire. From the counting houses of State Street to the shipyards of New Bedford and Salem, fortunes are made and lost on the tides. Sleek clippers, built from Maine white pine and manned by Yankee sons, circle the globe. They carry Turkish opium, Chinese porcelain, Hawaiian sandalwood, and California otter pelts. In Salem, the exotic spoils of the East Indies fill the Peabody Essex Museum, a testament to global reach. This is a world of prosperous merchants, stern Unitarian faith, and a social order as rigid as the granite of its foundations. The Federalist Party, the party of Washington and Adams, holds sway here, believing in rule by the wise, the good, and the rich. But the winds of change are already shifting, and the first gusts are economic. The sea, however, is about to be rivaled by the river. In 1814, an event occurs in the small town of Waltham that will echo far louder than any political speech. Francis Cabot Lowell, having memorized the designs of British power looms, opens the Boston Manufacturing Company on the Charles River. It is the first fully integrated cotton mill in America. Raw cotton enters at one end, finished cloth emerges at the other. But Lowell's true innovation is not just mechanical, it is social. To staff his looms, he does not turn to a landless underclass or children as the British did. He recruits the daughters of New England farmers, the Lowell Mill Girls. They live in closely supervised company boarding houses, attend lectures by Emerson, write for their own literary magazine, the Lowell Offering, and earn their own wages. For a time, it is hailed as a noble experiment, industrialization with a Puritan conscience. The Merrimack River soon becomes the American roar. Towns like Lowell, Lawrence, and Holyoke explode from farmland into industrial cities almost overnight. Brick canals channel water to turbine wheels, and the relentless thrum of machinery becomes the heartbeat of the Commonwealth. Massachusetts is no longer just a sailor. It has become a weaver, and its fabric is the future. Yet this bright new fabric is woven from a dark and distant thread. The cotton that feeds the insatiable mills of Lowell comes entirely from the slave plantations of the American South. This is the central, screaming contradiction of 19th century Massachusetts, a state founded by Puritans who saw themselves as a moral city upon a hill, now building its prosperity on the product of a system its conscience abhors. The nexus of State Street capital and Merrimack River industry forms an unspoken, powerful alliance with the slave power. For decades, Boston's finest mansions and most philanthropic institutions are quietly funded by profits linked to the Cotton Triangle. This moral compromise cannot hold, and the force that will shatter it arises from the very bedrock of Massachusetts's identity, its culture of moral inquiry. The second great pivot arrives not on a ship, but from a pulpit and a printing press. By the 1830s, the stern Calvinism of the Puritans has evolved. In its place blooms the vibrant, rebellious flower of transcendentalism. From Concord, a village just west of the industrial din, voices like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau proclaim a new gospel. The divinity of the individual soul, the moral authority of conscience over law, the sacredness of nature against the profanity of the factory. What is a man born for? Emerson asks, but to be a reformer. Their words are a spiritual gunpowder. They empower a generation to question every institution, church, state, economy. The institution they train their sights on most fiercely is slavery. The abolitionist movement finds its most radical, uncompromising home in Massachusetts. William Lloyd Garrison, a printer's apprentice from Newburyport, launches his newspaper, The Liberator, from Boston in 1831. His first editorial is a declaration of war. I am in earnest. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard. He is heard, and he is hated. A mob of gentlemen of property and standing drags him through the streets of Boston with a rope around his neck. Yet the movement grows. The wealthy Wendell Phillips becomes the golden trumpet of abolition. In Salem, black abolitionist Charles Lennox Rimmon speaks with fiery eloquence. Sojourner Truth, though not a native, finds a powerful audience here. They turn Massachusetts into a battleground of ideas, forcing ministers, merchants, and mill girls to choose a side. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 turns theory into terrifying reality. Federal law now requires citizens to aid in capturing people seeking freedom. Massachusetts responds with the 1851 Shadrach Rescue, where a mob frees a captured man from a Boston courtroom, and with the formation of vigilance committees. The moral clash becomes physical, and the Commonwealth positions itself as a defiant nullifier of federal immorality. This intellectual and moral ferment is the engine of another transformation, knowledge itself. Massachusetts becomes the schoolhouse of the nation. Horace Mann of Dedham leads a revolution in common schooling, arguing that universal public education is the great equalizer and the bedrock of a republic. The first normal schools for teacher training are founded here. Boston opens the first public high school in America. Meanwhile, on the banks of the Charles, a different kind of institution rises. In 1816, the college at the Botanic Garden in Cambridge is renamed Harvard University, beginning its evolution from a small Calvinist college into a national university. Across the river, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology is founded in 1861, a marriage of practical Yankee ingenuity and deep scientific inquiry. From the Lyceum lectures to the public library movement championed by men like George Ticknor, Massachusetts operates on a relentless belief that to inform the mind is to free the conscience and empower the citizen. Then, in April 1861, the long-simmering crisis boils over at Fort Sumter. Massachusetts, the hotbed of abolitionist agitation, is the first to answer President Lincoln's call for troops. The 6th Massachusetts Infantry marches through Baltimore to the defense of Washington and is the first to shed blood in the streets. Over the next 4 years, the Commonwealth pours its industrial might, its intellectual capital, and its sons into the Union cause. The mills work around the clock producing uniforms and blankets. The Springfield Armory becomes a hive of innovation and production, refining the rifles that equip the Union Army. The 54th Massachusetts Infantry, one of the first official black regiments, is recruited with great fanfare from across the North. Led by the young Boston Brahmin Robert Goodshaw, their heroic and doomed assault on Fort Wagner in 1863 is a powerful symbol that transforms the war's meaning. Massachusetts doesn't just fight the Civil War, it wages the crusade it has been preaching for 30 years. But victory in 1865 does not bring a peaceful New England idyll. The returning veterans find a state transformed yet again. The war has supercharged its industry. The center of economic and political gravity shifts decisively from the merchant princes of Boston to the industrial titans of the mill towns and the railroad barons. A new class emerges, the mill owners, the financiers, living in unprecedented opulence on Beacon Hill and in Back Bay, a neighborhood literally built upon gravel fill from the leveled hills of Needham. Their wealth is staggering, and their cultural influence grows, funding museums, symphonies, and universities. Yet in the shadow of their mansions, the industrial cities tell a different story. The Lowell experiment has long since decayed. The mill girls seeking better lives have been replaced by a new, more desperate workforce. First, impoverished Irish immigrants fleeing the Great Famine, then French Canadians, Italians, Portuguese, and Eastern Europeans. This, the Great Immigration, is the third seismic shift. It changes the very face, faith, and sound of Massachusetts. The Irish, in particular, arrive in tidal waves, crammed into disease-ridden tenements in Boston's North End and Fort Hill. They are met with virulent hatred. No Irish need apply signs are common. The established Yankee Protestant elite sees them as a papist horde, a threat to Republican values. Cartoons depict them as ape-like. They are relegated to the most menial jobs, digging canals, laying railroad tracks, serving as domestic servants. But they cling fiercely to their faith and their communities. They build a parallel society of parishes, schools, and benevolent societies, and through sheer numbers and political grit, they begin to climb. In 1885, Hugh O'Brien becomes Boston's first Irish Catholic mayor. It is a political earthquake, signaling the end of unquestioned Yankee hegemony. The state's politics become a raw battle between the Yankee and the ethnic, the Protestant and the Catholic, the Brahmin and the immigrant. This social strife plays out against a backdrop of increasing labor unrest. The post-war boom leads to brutal cycles of boom and bust. In the 1870s, the Panic of 1873 leads to mass unemployment. Workers, now including many immigrants, begin to organize. Great Railroad Strike of 1877 spreads to Massachusetts, with violent clashes in Boston. The Knights of Labor gain strength in the shoe factories of Lynn and Haverhill. The fight is for a living wage, for a 10-hour day, for dignity in the roaring caverns of the mills. The old paternalistic model is dead, replaced by a stark class conflict the Puritan founders could never have imagined. As the century wanes, Massachusetts stands at a crossroads, weary and wise from its tumultuous journey. It has pioneered industry and confronted its moral cost. It has championed abolition and grappled with a new form of urban poverty. It has preached the gospel of education and been challenged by the faiths of newcomers. It has evolved from a maritime province into an industrial powerhouse and an intellectual lighthouse. The 1800s closed not with the quiet certainty of its beginning, but with the complex, noisy, and unresolved tensions of a modern state. It is no longer a simple city upon a hill, but a crowded, contentious, vibrant metropolis, a crucible where the American future in all its promise and pain was being forged anew with every turn of the wheel, every strike of the typeset, and every vote cast in its crowded wards. The cradle had not just rocked the nation, it had grown up with it, its conscience both its burden and its guide.